You're taking a look inside Kansas politics. Welcome in. I'm Rebecca Chung. It's happening in cities, rural towns, suburbs. Human trafficking is happening across the country and in Kansas. And today we're diving into that topic with the highest ranking criminal investigator in the state. Joining me now is Homeland Security Investigation Special Agent in Charge, Tae-Kuk Cho. I want to start by defining human trafficking. Some may confuse it with human smuggling, but there are some key differences between the two. So tell me where the line is drawn.
Yeah, so I think most people confuse human smuggling and human trafficking, and oftentimes even prosecutors and investigators get the lines blurred. So we have two things, right? Human smuggling is where an individual voluntarily tries to cross an international border for some type of financial, economic, material gain. Human trafficking is where there is force, fraud, or coercion involved, where they are not able to move about freely, they're held against their will. It's essentially modern day slavery, and those are the differences between the two.
There are two types of human trafficking, sex trafficking and labor trafficking. Let's start with sex trafficking. Now, just recently, the FBI found 200 sex trafficking victims and more than 125 suspects during a 2-week child exploitation operation in July. This was during Operation Cross Country. When it comes to sex trafficking, what do law enforcement agencies look out for, and how long can these operations usually take?
So the United States government has a center at the Department of Homeland Security. It's called the Center to Combat Human Trafficking. It is the largest center to investigate allegations of trafficking, whether it's forced trafficking or sex trafficking. Within the CCHT, you have 16 different offices. So DHS is the lead when it comes to conducting human trafficking investigations, and Homeland Security Investigations, or HSI, is the principal investigative agency for combating human trafficking. Between the two, you have forced labor and you have sex trafficking. The majority of the cases we find here in Kansas involve children, and children, defined as those under the age of 18, really have no say. If they are involved in any type of trafficking, whether it's forced labor or sex trafficking, they are victims. When it comes to adults, it's a different story altogether. The majority of adults that are engaged in trafficking or that are victims have been found to be in forced labor trafficking. In terms of how long these investigations take, it could take months, it could take years. We've had instances where children have aged out. In other words, they were victims when they were 12, 13 years old. By the time the case goes to trial, they're 17, 18. It takes a long time because the threshold for prosecution is so high. In terms of conducting these investigations, you have multiple agencies that we work together with. HSI works with state and local law enforcement as well as other federal agencies. I would say the top two agencies that conduct these investigations federally are HSI and FBI. We also work with the Kansas Bureau of Investigation as well as other local police departments.
While labor trafficking can also involve forms of sexual abuse and have similar signs to sex trafficking, there are some things that set it aside. So what sets labor trafficking aside? Is it more difficult to identify, would you say?
The differences between labor trafficking and sex trafficking, let's say there are commonalities, first of all. Traffickers view human beings as commodities, nothing more, nothing less, a means to an end to generate revenue, which is the crime itself. When it comes to labor, usually they will employ adults because you are able to, you have a longer shelf life, so to speak, whereas when it comes to a child may not be able to engage in certain types of work. However, again, we found both children and adults who've been victims of labor, forced labor trafficking. In this area in Middle America, you have many factories, you have slaughterhouses, you have plants where there's very little supervision by members of the community. We often do not know what's going on inside that industrial plant. So we found instances of children and adults who are being trafficked and having to work in these really poor conditions.
Wow. What are we seeing as far as sex trafficking and labor trafficking in Kansas? What trends are you noticing more recently?
The majority is sex trafficking, and we have found a large degree of children that are brought in across state lines for the purposes of sex trafficking. And again, children do not have a say. If you're a minor, you're forced to conduct some type of activity, you're a victim. And oftentimes in the media, people call this prostitution. A child does not have a choice to determine whether it's prostitution or not. They're held against their will. As far as HSI is concerned, we view children as victims if they are involved in sex trafficking or forced labor trafficking. When it comes to adults, again, it's a little harder. There are nuances. There are various variables that are involved in the prosecution, but we take a victim-centered approach here at HSI. We focus on the individual. We focus on trying to rehabilitate the victim. We work with various NGOs, over 100 NGOs just here in Kansas, and we try to ensure that that victim is, one, not only able to testify and bring the perpetrator to justice, but also at the same time get back on his or her feet after everything settles.
Thank you, Tay Cook. And coming up, we're talking about how you can identify human trafficking in your area. We'll be right back. You're watching Inside Kansas Politics.
It's Renewal by Anderson's 28th anniversary, and that means you get to celebrate with an extraordinary offer. For a limited time only, get 28% off your entire project, plus no money down, no interest, and no payments for a whole year. You can cash in on this great deal and remain confident you're getting the best product and service out there.
We have a survey that's sent out after installation, and most of those surveys come back with they love the way the window was sold, the way it was installed, financing that's available, and all the different combinations that are available also.
Renewal by Anderson has spent decades perfecting our patented Fibrex windows, ensuring they'll last for many more years to come.
It doesn't rot, it doesn't peel. Unlike some of the early concepts of composites, they had problems because they rushed them to market. We spent over 20 years developing the Fibrex.
Celebrate our 28th anniversary with 28% off. Call the number on your screen or visit rbabestoffer.com to take advantage of this exclusive offer. Renewal by Anderson, the better way to a better window.
I'm Ryan Seacrest. First responders are people who stand for a greater purpose. They will be there for you when nobody else is, to help you, your family, your community make it through, whatever the day may bring. This is their selfless promise. This is their sworn duty to protect, to serve, to help. They put themselves in harm's way for us. They come to the rescue at times when we need them most. First responders are making enormous personal sacrifices to keep showing up for us and fighting the good fight. Nearly 70% of all firefighters are volunteers. That means when they get injured or quarantined, they may not have a way to pay their rent or keep their family safe and fed. No matter who you are or where you live, when you call 911 and ask for help, first responders show up now. Let's show up for the people who show up for us every day and every night.
Welcome back to Inside Kansas Politics, where we're talking about human trafficking with Special Agent in Charge Tay Cook Cho. Tay Cook, it can sometimes be difficult to spot human trafficking, especially for people who aren't trained. So what are some of the key indicators that people should look out for when trying to identify human traffickers?
Yeah, thanks for that, Rebecca. Human trafficking has variables and nuances when it comes to both the trafficker and the victim. The majority of those engaged, it can be men, it can be women, it can be of any nationality, any ethnic group. It's really difficult to say, but what we found is that the majority tend to be older men. The victims tend to be younger. Usually the traffickers are older men who have a certain degree of means. They use, again, force, fraud, or coercion. They're using violence at times to control their victims. When it comes to the victims, oftentimes we see that the kids have withdrawn. They're not talking to their parents. They're not engaging with their friends. We found variables in terms of sometimes they're not well fed, sometimes they're not clothed properly, poor hygiene. Other times we've found brandings or tattoos or markings on them, substance abuse. So it really varies between a trafficker and the victim.
And another layer to that, identifying sex trafficking versus labor trafficking. How does that happen?
Oftentimes we find instances of kids who have gone to school and who are falling asleep. We had one case up in Nebraska where a child kept falling asleep, so the teacher asked, "What's going on?" And the child said, I worked 8 hours last night. And the teacher's, "You're 13 years old. What do you mean you worked 8 hours?" And that was a federal investigation that started just by the child who kept falling asleep in class. When it comes to sex trafficking, again, there are so many variables because sometimes we find that the victim may become really closed off and withdrawn. Other times they're hyperactive when it comes to talking about sexuality. We found victims who are completely in a state of distress to others who are carrying new handbags, wearing new clothes, because they're working for a living, so to speak. So it really runs the gamut when it comes to trying to pigeonhole specifically what to look out for when it comes to both a trafficker and a trafficking victim.
But even more so, you said the teacher that spotted a student that had that issue. It's about being mindful, would you say?
Absolutely.
Being aware of your surroundings.
I think that's just it. You hit it on the head. It's for parents, it's important that they engage their kids. They have that conversation, that dialogue to see if something's just not right and to ensure that they're able to communicate with their kids. Same thing with teachers. Same thing with law enforcement. It's important that if you are a victim of trafficking, whether it's forced labor or sex trafficking, that you tell someone in authority, that you tell your parents, someone, because we will listen and we will engage you and we will take action.
I know you said it's hard to kind of pinpoint certain things, but law enforcement, I'm sure, looks out for certain things when they're trying to identify a sex trafficking victim or a labor trafficking victim. So what are those things that law enforcement is really, what seals the deal there, and that this is someone who is a victim of human trafficking?
I would say the majority, a good 90 to 95% of our investigative leads have come from online. Everyone is on their phone. Everyone is on social media on one platform or another, and this is the same platform that human traffickers are on. This is where they find their victims. We're also online. We have undercover agents who are online, sometimes posing as kids, sometimes posing as adults, and you will find parents who are willing to send you photos of their children, sometimes video. It's a scary world out there. So we're online. This is where we're finding our investigative leads. Everything is about messages, photos, video, and this is what we do to ensure that we have that evidence for successful prosecution.
So you have intel that the public may not have, but then how does the public arm themselves against something like this?
I think the public needs to be mindful that the person that they think they're speaking to or messaging on the other line may not be, in actuality, a real person that they think they are. You have adults who pose as kids and will try to friend you on a social platform, start engaging in text messages, and then start asking for photos. And then from there, it can lead to sextortion. And this is something that we tell kids in school is not only do you need to be mindful of other dangers at school, such as active shootings, school violence, bullying, but you really need to be mindful of those that you send photos to. We found that 75% of kids have sent photos of themselves in a state of undress or nude to friends. And the problem with that is you don't know where these photos end up. Oftentimes they end up in the hands of those who are engaged in what we call CSAM, or child sexual abuse material. Next thing you know, it's on certain websites. and then it's traded amongst these individuals. So once it's online, it's forever.
Have you ever been in a position where it was difficult to identify human trafficking as well, and where it took maybe months to get all the evidence necessary to crack down on a human trafficking operation? What did that look like?
So I spent 3 years working at Homeland Security Investigations in the U.S. Embassy, Bangkok, Thailand. Part of my area of responsibility was Cambodia. At the time, I went from being a narcotics agent or a drug agent to having to work investigating crimes against children. So I spent a majority of my time in those 3 years working in Cambodia, pursuing child sex traffickers. Oftentimes I went into these slums. I went into the areas where you had adults with weapons and kids, anywhere from 7 years old to 10 years old. So I engaged in that type of work, and it's truly arduous. It's hard work, but it's rewarding work.
Thank you, Tae Cook. And after the break, we're looking at the risks and consequences of human trafficking. What makes someone a vulnerable target, and what impact does trafficking have on traffickers and victims? We're getting those answers next on Inside Kansas Politics.
Find out about home services, unique local businesses, and events around Northeast Kansas. Watch No Place Like Home, Thursdays at 9 on Fox 43 AM Live. Sponsored by Azura Credit Union.
I'm Diana Cox.
And I'm Steve Matukowicz. Together with Washburn University,
we're bringing you a special series highlighting exceptional women in our local communities.
Watch Everything Woman on 27 News. Sponsored by Sharp Honda, Topeka ER and Hospital, and Washburn University.
Fair Lawn Plaza is the place to get fit, have fun, and feel fabulous. You can find everything you need to live a healthy and active lifestyle. Whether you want to learn the art of dance and expression, reach your full potential with martial arts, elevate your fitness game and embrace a healthier lifestyle, or get geared up to play your favorite sport, Fair Lawn Plaza is your destination for health and wellness and a whole lot more.
Come out to the on-site Clear the Shelters event on the patio at Jeremiah Bullfrog's Bar and Grill, Saturday, August 12th from 10 a.m. to 3 p.m. This is a benefit for SCARS, a second chance animal refuge. The primary goal of SCARS is saving abused, neglected, and abandoned dogs. They strive to help them find lifelong homes with caring people. You can start the process by meeting adoptable dogs from SCARS. This event is sponsored by the Northeast Kansas Animal Welfare Foundation. Let's help clear the shelters on August 12th.
Mouth-watering, enticing, satisfying. Taco Villa. Since 1973, Taco Villa has been serving up their own style of delectable Mexican food. From the thing, to the nacho platter, to the low-carb salad, and everything in between. Taco Villa satisfies. Take it to the next level and smother anything in our famous signature chili con queso. Get your fix. Dine in, carry out, or call ahead with your order. Taco Villa on 21st next to the toy store.
Welcome back to Inside Kansas Politics. We're now taking a look at the risks and consequences of human trafficking with Special Agent Tae Cook Cho. Tae Cook, there's certain things that can make someone vulnerable to becoming a victim of human trafficking. I've read that mental health concerns can play a role, substance use. But what have you noticed when it comes to people who are usually being trafficked?
The majority of the trafficking victims we found, one, are online. They're preyed upon by predators using various social media platforms, but these predators go after those kids, those individuals who are lacking in something. In other words, they're vulnerable, whether it's attention, it's seeking just an adult or someone to notice them, someone who's willing to talk to them. Sometimes it's money, it's financial. Oftentimes, kids will want to get the latest phone or the latest designer clothes, and these individuals will say, you know, send me a photo and I'll pay for it. You look like a model. They will use these really tried and true schemes to try to get that child to really talk to them and provide that material that they're looking for. So everything is on social media these days.
Human trafficking can also take a toll on someone's psychological and physical health. So in some cases, there can be a sense of Stockholm syndrome, I was reading, between victims and their traffickers. What are some other health issues that can arise from being a victim of human trafficking?
Substance abuse plays a large part because these traffickers will use illegal drugs to try to numb or dull the senses of the child. Usually this is when sex trafficking is involved. We've also found tattoos or branding involved where they mark the child as property. So this takes a large, just a significant psychological, the degree of harm to the mental psyche of the child, and it takes years for these children to recover. Once they come home, once they're rescued, they may not feel like they fit in because they feel ashamed. And that's why it's more important than ever for these kids, for these victims, to tell an adult what happened, because it's a never-ending spiral of guilt, feeling like they do not belong once this happens.
And human trafficking has an opposite effect, I would say, on traffickers. They may benefit, actually, from having cheap labor, money, and at times, victims may even be offered an opportunity to escape victimization and become traffickers themselves. Have you noticed this pattern from your time in the field, and what relationship do you notice between traffickers and victims?
A lot of it is a mental game. These traffickers will try to use force in the beginning, then ultimately it becomes almost a paternal relationship with the victim, where the victim feels like, at least this person cares for me. In the beginning, they may be forced into labor or sexual servitude, but I've personally found where there have been instances where these traffickers will allow the victim to leave, but they stay put. They stay put because they have a certain degree of freedom, of financial access that they didn't have before. The traffickers paying attention to them. I've had individuals where in court they would tell me, I'm 19 years old now, this started when I was 12, but this person cares about me, bought me a car, got me an apartment, and I would retort and say, well, yes, but you were also sexually enslaved 5 to 7 times a day, but they didn't see it that way. They saw it as life. They became numb to the situation around them.
All right, thank you, Tay Cook. We'll be right back. You're watching Inside Kansas Politics.
K-State, KU, all sports.
Join us every Sunday night right after 27 News at 10.
As we bring you another exciting week of K-Nation.
Sponsored by 988 Suicide and Crisis Lifeline. The Holton Weather Cam is sponsored by Ellis Boys, Chrysler, Dodge, Jeep, and Ram.
The story of Grace Med has always been told through its people, both those who serve and those who it is our honor to serve. We meet at the intersection of compassion and vulnerability, bringing health where there was illness and hope where there was despair. Our patients come to us bearing the weight of living in the margins, and we share the love of Jesus Christ with them by providing compassionate quality health care for all their physical, emotional, and spiritual needs. Because health restored is always hope renewed. Find hope today by scheduling an appointment with.
My hopes about my chaplaincy is that I'm really going to be a person whom officers are going to trust to. It's where ministry of Dr. Stanley is very important to me personally. He's a mentor for me, how to bring the message across and how to bring the essence of good news to people who need it.
Life can be a breeze in the shade of a nice tree, of course, only if you've taken care of your trees. When it comes to tree service, you can trust the certified arborist at Brown's Tree Service. With generations of experience of taking care of trees around Northeast Kansas, Brown's does it all from tree pruning, keeping your trees in tip-top shape, to tree removal, disease, and insect control. For 4 generations, Brown's Tree Service has the experience that you deserve when taking care of your trees. Take a break in the shade and give us a call today.
The 27 News Storm Tracker is sponsored by D.L. Smith Electric, bringing your vision to life.
Welcome back to Inside Kansas Politics. I'm Rebecca Chung here with Tay Cook Cho. Tay Cook, This isn't something that just law enforcement can handle. It also takes partnership. Can you tell me how HSI is getting involved in the community to raise awareness about human trafficking?
So on August 16th at the National Law Enforcement Training Center in Gladstone, Missouri, HSI is going to sponsor the DHS Center to Combat Human Trafficking. We have invited federal, state, and local law enforcement, as well as members of office, airport workers, and over 100 non-governmental organizations that deal with trafficking. We are going to have experts from Washington come in, provide a symposium on human trafficking to provide awareness, because for HSI, human trafficking along with fentanyl trafficking are the top two drivers for crime in the region.
And you were mentioning how Missouri, Kansas, very unique areas for human trafficking and fentanyl trafficking, correct?
That's correct. So Kansas ranks number 31 in the nation for human trafficking. Missouri ranks number 9 in the nation for human trafficking. Now, you may not think that that's necessarily significant on the broad scale. However, because Kansas is situated right in the middle of America, and you have interstates, you have highways that cross horizontally and vertically, we find not only drugs, but human trafficking victims, child sex labor that comes and stays in this area.
Thank you again. And we're continuing our conversation on human trafficking with Kansas Attorney General Chris Kobach coming up next week's episode of Inside Kansas Politics.
So the Kansas Bureau of Investigation, which is under my office, is conducting 4 active investigations right now.
We're getting the latest update on where human trafficking stands in Kansas. We dive into the 4 Ps: prevention, protection, prosecution, and partnership. Why law enforcement says it's the key to taking on human trafficking. Plus, how the state's new human smuggling law could be enforced. That's coming up on Inside Kansas Politics. And that was your look inside Kansas politics. If you want to keep up to date on all things Kansas politics, then follow us on social media. Follow us on Twitter at InKansasPolitics, and follow us on Facebook. Just search Inside Kansas Politics. We'll also post the full video on YouTube. Just search KSNT News and check ksnt.com/inside-kansas-politics for past episodes. If you have a story you want Kansas state legislators to hear or topics you think we should cover, let us know. You can email us at ikp@ksnt.com. We'll see you here same time, same place. Have a good day.